Good day, everyone, and thank you for having me at your Project Management Toastmaster forum. I'm so happy to come back. It's almost a year since I was here the last time, and a lot has happened in the last year, in the last 2 years when we talk about the pandemic and how we can move forward using emotional intelligence information, as it is the #1 thing that is going to get you more connected to your teams. So historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different than the past ones. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Very apropos quote from Arundhati Roy, something that really spoke to me when I read it about how I feel about the last 2 years. I feel like I've walked through a portal, and I feel like we're still walking through that portal. We're still discovering what's on the other side and where we're going. When we think about March 2020 till now, so much has changed and so much has transformed. And the state of the world today is not in a very positive space. There's some really great things that have happened, but right now there's a lot of stress. From the pandemic, we've had travel barriers. We have the implementation of far-reaching remote work, which for some is really great and for others is a barrier in itself. We have violence as we've always had, but it's more present. We have larger, sorry, I heard something. Is that me or someone else? Okay, I'll continue. When we look at discrimination across global pathways, war, which we've had before, but we have increasingly war now. More and more families who are forced to leave their cities and their homes to seek safer places to live, and increased global suffering where it's felt across all areas and not just in isolation and hidden from others. So amongst the state of the world, amongst the pandemic and where we've come from and where we're going, one of the things that I think is really important is, what is your wish for tomorrow? And for me, I wish to give everyone courage. I believe that courage is the one thing that we don't all get in our DNA when we grow up. It's not taught to everyone. It's not learned behavior. It's not even known in some places. I wish I could give everyone courage to ask the questions they are afraid to ask, to go to places that they're afraid to travel to be amongst people that they're uncertain, and to propel their own lives in the way that they want to seek the happiness that they're looking for and the value that they're seeking. Courage is a very important asset in our lives in order to pivot our careers, work with teams, generate income, and be healthy. So that is something that I wish for tomorrow for everyone. Where do we sit with all this change? The pandemic has transformed our workplaces, as it transformed the way that we do groceries, it's transformed the way that we travel, the way that we move supply chain, the economy, the impacts on our health. How is this affecting us from a work life? The mix of hybrid and remote is established, but it's not solidified. It's still a moving object. We've had increased digital transformation in our lives, pushing more softwares and communication tools, and implicitly asking people to be more online, be more present. Greater emphasis on health and wellness is more prevalent in a lot of the work structures, because we see that the pandemic has forced us to be more open about how we feel. As we walked through this ordeal together and we continue to manage it together, we've been more vocal about how it impacts our health, our mental health, our physical health, when we've had to pause because we've had impacts directly from the pandemic or the outset from other family members. And from a personal standpoint, how do we sit with this change? How do we return to our social habits? Do we do what we used to do? Do we meet as we used to meet? Do we go to entertainment venues as we used to? Or do we start new habits? And immunization is now normalized globally, which is not something that is new for us per se, but the sense of having to have a certain health profile in order to move in any space is different. And so this sense of being immunized is now generalized. And going forward, we'll see more of that in our structures when we move across the world. Education training has been turned on its head. This is one of the oldest institutions that hasn't been affected as much by digitalization transformation. Yeah, we had virtual workshops in college and university in the past, but now with the pandemic, the education system has been brought online. And although it's been brought back into the classroom, it's also kind of trying to figure out how to improve and extend itself to more people, because education is the pathway to understanding how to advocate for yourself and find new ways to provide. So these are interesting dynamics that have happened as a result of the pandemic. One of the things that has been very significant in my pathways when I speak to other people in business or in their personal lives is that we as a community have a stronger appreciation for time. We knew that time was valuable before, but now we measure it as work-life balance in a way that we didn't before. That our time with our families is so important that we understand that we don't need to be online. We can focus on each other and turn off the world and be more connected for ourselves, for our families, for our health, but also take the time that we need to exercise or to enjoy our hobbies because nothing else was available. Things were turned off and time was heightened. The value of time was heightened. And as we go back to the workplace, we realize we are not exchanging that time for more work or for more emphasis on commuting or other needs. We want to keep that time in place. So this becomes a really important formula for any leader when focusing on how to shift and what does the next work life mean for your organization. So what has the pandemic taught us or emphasized things that we already know? We're stronger working united. The economy is weakened and global inequality is a persistent issue. It's not going to go away. We need to fix it. We need to be innovative. Our healthcare is crippled. If we continue to fix the things that the pandemic demonstrated to us through the ways that we have in the past, it's just going to get worse. We're only as strong as our country's political position. We saw great weakness when other countries took on positions that were not in line with the world. Our supply chain dependencies steer us towards self-sustainment and how we can innovate from our own local markets and innovation pathways. People within Canada, for example, who have created and innovated products because supply chain was slower or not available or just couldn't produce. Our inflation crisis is increasing with this stability that we continue to ride that wave. And it is impacted by our worker shortage, which has been caused by illness, early retirements or forced retirements, less people coming to our country, migrant workers that would normally work because they could travel freely, workers seeking more of salary equality, and a lack of skilled workforce that's just not replacing the ones that have stopped working. So there's a lot of transformation that companies are now faced with in order to not just deliver a project or manage an organization, provide a service or an output, but also these competing factors the pandemic has demonstrated. In a recent global report by Randstad, they said something that I think we've rang true for years. Compensation alone is no longer the key to attracting workers. I know I was saying that 3 years ago in keynotes, but I think what they're highlighting is that it really is not competing with a healthy work-life balance that people have embraced more and more over the last 2 years. And how do they maintain that with the tools that they've been provided by organizations to either work from home or other remote locations that formerly just weren't attainable? Keeping job security and maintaining a sense of job security. We know that jobs are, by definition, not secure, but how do we maintain our sense of our career pathway, our professional pathways and journey, whether it's in one organization or through an industry, and make sure that that security is relevant and have a pleasant work environment. 55% value having a healthy, pleasant work environment over compensation. So really, these values are shifting in line with having more time, being more connected to what matters, and being able to derive passion from not just your personal life, but the fact that your career is more present in that day-to-day. I don't know about you, but I have a strong reluctance to go back to what was. standing on the quay of Bloor & Young subway station, waiting to take the South train. It was like being in a sardine can. I don't want to go back to that. And so far, we haven't had to. For most cases, there's still this ebb and flow of traffic that you're never quite too much impacted when you travel. So how do we keep this momentum of having flexibility, having, a good work-life balance, and being able to work where we want? What is that balance? For some people, working at home is really enabling them to focus on their hobbies, focus on, their health and welfare, being able to pivot from the desk to the next personal aspect in a moment. But for some people, that did not work over the last 2 years very well. It had strong challenges, whether they had families of young children or dependent elders. This really played a factor in being able to lead their professional careers and be present in their space, in their home, for the ones that are dependent on them. So all this to say that we have all these new factors to think about. We're more and more present in each other's lives just by being in the screen. And so how do we as leaders, we are leaders at every level, enhance our ability to connect with our teams, be able to support them? With emotional intelligence, there's a lot of information in the room that you can use to make better decisions. Now, I have to say, every time I do this keynote, I need this slide because people to this day still ask me, what is emotional intelligence? And think it's important for you to connect to a definition by which I think it's a set of emotional and social skills that guide the way we perceive and express ourselves. It's how we cultivate and maintain social relationships, how we assess change, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. I like to say it's the internal suit that we all wear to the office or our workplace that can't be seen or anticipated. And that's your opportunity to share information and to receive information from other individuals to make better informed decisions, build better interpersonal relationships, and plan for your project or your team or your organization in a more meaningful way. So today, about moving forward, moving past the pandemic, but understanding that it's taught us so many things in a world that's, to me, still very chaotic. 4 key things that we can use to move forward. 1, observe. Observe what's going on, observe what's in the room, observe how things are read and written. Have empathy for what you hear and you see. Use that information to make informed decisions about building teams, building structure, and pushing forward those projects. Ask the questions. An assumption is the poison of informed decision-making. You need to ask the questions in order to do that reality testing to know what's really going on. And what information had I not asked, have I now gained that'll help me direct us forward better as a team, as an organization. Listen to what is being told to you. Sometimes when we ask questions, we put our assumptions in front of the answer and we weave that response into our bias. Purely listen to what's being said and the way it's formulated. Ask more questions, but gain that organizational awareness that helps you package more information to make better decisions and then act. Motivation, demonstrate how you've heard and seen the information that's around you and put it into plan and show that you're validating the things that you've been requesting and seeing and get your teams motivated. Let's find out more. The current trends that we're seeing in a couple of studies has pretty much aligned with what I've experienced and perhaps yourself. So for workers who have made the switch to teleworking, more people are indicating that they have an easier work-life balance, but they're less connected to their colleagues. I'd like to pause and ask for you to share your thoughts. Have you felt less connected in your workspace or more connected to your colleagues based on your own individual work life? Are you missing your colleagues? Are you just as connected as you were before? Share your thoughts in the chat. Carrie, what do we have?
Less connected, not as connected. Went from 100% remote to have now and more connected. I'm missing my colleagues, not liking the gas prices, not that much different, not as connected, less connected, miss the person interactions.
That's great. Thank you for that feedback. And so I think, we're aligning with what we're seeing this one study is that people are missing that human connection, and they get more value out of being able to speak and see with more information in the room and make those decisions and feel connected to the projects or the resources that are driving those projects. So how can we work within the confines of our construct, if it's hybrid model or full remote in your environment, or if you've always had to go into work, how do you maintain or increase your ability to connect? So one of the things that has highlighted all of this online work that we're doing and the work that is driving us to feel less connected from each other is the fact that we work longer hours and we work different hours. And so some people have the ability to work later at night, which is not in line with core work hours. So they miss the time with their colleagues, they miss those connections. But overall, the Ontario province has recently put in a policy that forces companies over 25 employees or more to put policy that talks about how to disconnect safely and have those core work hours and not allow people to continue to work and drive more the right to disconnect conversation. Now you think, why would government have to put in the policy? Well, it was not for nothing that they released this policy just before a provincial election. It was kind of a carrot in a timely world. There's not a lot of countries, even though this is provincial legislation, not government of Canada legislation, but there's not a lot of countries that are putting this type of policy in an act. But I think it's a conversation where for Ontario's space, there's a number of people that felt from a health and welfare perspective, companies need to be forced a little bit to really honor this and to think more about the right to disconnect. So very interesting that Ontario has put this in place. And it's really a catalyst for conversations across organizations to build policy and to protect worker burnout. Now, we'll dive into more of the ways that we can help our teams be more dynamic and feel more connected. But as a leader, you're taking this information and you're saying, how do I make it better? One of the things that I think is really important for leaders to recognize is regardless of what happens, the work will happen. It's people that you manage. And so trust that the work will happen and focus on the relationships, focus on the energy of your teams, focus on how your workforce is mobilized. What are those levers, those carrots, and those systems and tools that you can put in place to make it easier on them, to say you've heard them, and to connect them more. And so increasing team dynamics, there's some really easy ways that you can do that immediately. Whether you're in a hybrid model or not, team dynamics have to be more explicit. Write it down, create a team charter. Talk about this is how we're going to work. It's really one slide, but it's a workshop. It's an opportunity for you as a team to now say, in this new world, in this new space that we're working in, however we are set up, whether we're half full remote, half remote, whatnot, what are our work hours? What do we call think time? Maybe our core work hours are 10:30 to 3, and our think time is 1 to 2 and 9:30 to 10:30 and 3 to 5. Maybe the number of days that people are expected to show up at a location, whether it's the office or another space. Write that all down, make it explicit. Decide as a team, what is your charter, whether it's a project team or an organization team. This is something that is really going to drive the content from the people and provide something that everyone can rely upon. This is what we said we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And then agree in advance, when do you expect to be in the office and why? So from my perspective, I love to have in-office events that are around, cheering for people, awarding them, celebrating their birthday, but also financial planning sessions or meetings that require workshopping and concentration, as well as all staff meetings where you can be more connected with your employees and your leaders and ask questions in person. And every quarter, do a retrospective with your team. Is this still working with us, for us? Do we need to revamp our charter? Are we happy with how we've set up ourselves for success? Do we feel connected enough? And find ways to innovate that. If we look at the other side of the pendulum, we're looking at people who really enjoy being in the office because it works best for them, either because of their families at home or other distractions, or they like routine. Routine breeds success. And so the ability to get up and have that go out, do something, go somewhere, close that off at the end of the day, and then leave and go back to personal life helps them focus and really produce well. So there's two sides of that picture. And so what we want to really recognize is that people work differently, and not everyone processes data the same way. And so sometimes there's barriers or there's different reasons why individuals could receive information differently and how they transform that. And so it's important to identify communication needs in your organization that allows for a transparent, safe way for people to talk about how they take information in and how they give information out. The fact that we're in these screens all day long, we limit ourselves to really understanding what's it like on the other side for them? What's it like for me? How do I process a meeting versus someone else? Do I need more think time? Do I need to write things down? Do I need to get back to you tomorrow because I'm going to think about it before I can respond? Where some people can respond in the moment. They can throw out ideas. They can solution in space and time without really having a lot of preparation. But we need to understand why people are different and how they process information so that we can make it inclusive and nobody is left behind. We do that by standardizing certain tools so that we don't have to think about those things. They just pick them up off the shelf and use them. And then understanding what kind of tools we need to bring to the office that support different practices of, disseminating information and data so that you know what your workforce needs and that they know what tools are available to them. Let's look at a couple of those things. So first of all, build acceptance in your team. It's language that has to be spoken. We work and live in a world where we're exposed to different things in our lives, and now they're more in front of our face when we're online. I can see the color of your couch. I can see that your daughter needs a snack. I can see that your dog wants to go outside. This is all information that tells me more about who you are and how we interact together. And so it's important to show that I respect that information and that acceptance is part of our work style and that we're all built differently. And so as we see different needs across the screen or in office, we accept who we are as individuals, we increase the trust and collaboration of our teams and our community. So it's just, having that language, sharing that acceptance. As leaders, we allow that space to really grow and bond our teams. When we talk about reasonable accommodation, it's actually a legal term. It's your HR terms. But how do we normalize reasonable accommodation to create a space where we can understand people's needs in a more transparent way? So obviously not everyone's going to raise their hand and say, I have dyslexia. I need these tools in order to receive information differently and process it. But there's a way to create a space that's common for everyone to say what tools they need because they process data differently. But being aware of how some of the different needs across individuals, what kind of tools would they need? How do they receive information? Just understanding and walking the user experience of different types of personality and different types of DNA. So for example, it's not for nothing that Richard Branson is now normalizing dyslexia as a skill set on LinkedIn, because he believes that dyslexia was a reason for him to be able to succeed the way he has in Build, Virgin, and all the products that he was able to build. And so he's normalizing a disability or a need that he had in order to assimilate data different than other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's different tools to be able to do that. Same for ADD, same for a deficit hyperactivity disorder or auditory processing disorder. The interesting thing about some of these needs that I list here is that they're invisible, and most people won't talk about them. And some people won't talk about them because they've never been diagnosed. So today's workforce represents professionals that can do many different things, but it's important that we provide the tools so that they can feel comfortable coming to the office or going to their desk and be able to react in these new scenarios the pandemic has created for them versus the old ones. And how do they process that information and still feel connected? So as leaders, here's a couple of ways that we can build better connection to our teams and really create a space that is inclusive. We use color. Whether we know it or not, a lot of people use color as a way to tag work items. For me, pink is my vacation, blue is my executive meetings, red are my real executive meetings that I need to get to, and green is my financial meetings. I don't need to know what the words are because the colors mean something to me. And so cognitive recognition tells me exactly what process I need to execute in order to attend these meetings. If we standardize our meeting agendas, people can come prepared with their thoughts. I can't tell you how many online meetings I attend in a day, sometimes up to 14. They go in 15-minute increments. And how many times there was no agenda in that meeting? I didn't know what I was being expected. Now, for me, that doesn't cause me anxiety. I just show up and I'll figure it out. But for some people, that causes great anxiety to the point where they can't concentrate on the meeting. For other people, they are spending the entire meeting trying to process the meeting, take notes so that they can read after what the meeting was about and then process their thoughts. These are all different types of needs that we are not generally aware of, but they do exist. And so there's a lot of anxiety that is present when we don't make it easier for people to receive data. If we classify work by tasks, rather than email our teams or chat messages, then we don't have to go searching and filing in our emails or in our chat messages to sift out what is the critical work that we have to do. We need to enforce the measurement of value of our work versus what time it takes for us to do it. And one of the ways that we can do that is really say, tell me how much time, or rather, tell me what it would take for you to deliver a great output. And you tell me how much time that would take. And I'll go with that rather than me saying, can you get it to me by tomorrow? Because maybe by tomorrow still won't deliver the value that is really required for that. We know now that we really need some breaks between all those meetings. It's just not normal to keep going, receiving information all the time without a pause. Like our brains just get saturated. So using those Outlook tools or whatever email tool that you're using to end those meetings a little bit early or start a little bit late gives us a little bit of time to breathe, grab a drink, coffee, water, or just, take a quick walk and change our minds. We had it at the office, but we don't have it anymore. Identify think time. We talked about that before. We implemented in my team, no meeting Wednesday. At some points, we just had to stop all meetings on a specific day, giving that time back to people so that they could do the work. Flexible work days allows people who are night thinkers to do the work that they need at night and not be worried about not being present at certain times of the day, and allow day doers to do what they need to do at the day so that they can focus on other things at the night. We also want to recognize that people need to prepare their families in the morning and pick up in the afternoon. So in my team, we don't have any meetings between 9 and 9:30 because that's generally when pickup and drop off is. And in the afternoon between 3:45 and 4:15 or 4:30, because that's when parents are collecting. People generally come back after and continue their work, but they know that they have that flexibility to do what they need to do for their families without feeling like they're going to miss a meeting. Transparently pushing back on more deliverables to your executives demonstrates to your teams that, hey, just because somebody asked for it doesn't mean that has to happen. So when it makes sense, go back up and say, I think this needs 2-3 more days. I know you really need it, but there's only so much that we can do here. Demonstrating visibly that you are pushing back shows the teams that you're just not pushing down, but you're also pushing up. And balancing those online meetings with in-person meetings, now that some of us have that hybrid model or full and back in the office meeting, will generate more of the connected sense that people are lacking. Holding workshops specifically or brainstorming sessions when it's hard to do online, bringing those back into spaces that are public spaces or meeting spaces. This will give you a better sense of accomplishment as a group, as opposed to having some disconnectedness online. There's a true fear of return to work, and you haven't talked about it in your teams. I encourage you to do so. There's a real sense of concern for a lot of people on what return to work means, because being at home or being not as connected in the office physically has created the absences of some biases. And that has been a sense of relief for individuals. On other hands, the presence of new biases is abound, and that's creating anxiety. The pressure to be in person again is real. So for those that are going back in the office, taking selfies, sharing with their teams, hey, it's great to be in the office, but be mindful that it's not a pressure to other people. Do it in a way that it doesn't make it sound like if you're not in the office, you're not cool. And then the fear of contracting illness. There's still a large number of people that have a health concern or are not sure that are we really safe to go back? Make sure that your teams have still normalized some of the things that we might not do as frequently as society, like wear masks or have hand sanitizer. We don't talk about it as much in the news or in the day-to-day, but it's still there and people can still use it. And so make sure that you keep those normalized so that people feel confident that if they're the only one wearing a mask, it's not going to be perceived as, an outlier. The fear of returning to work and how do we overcome it? So emphasizing individuals' contributions to their work, not where they work. So what is it that they're producing and how great their work is? We don't care where you did it. Allow a natural progression towards a collaboration in person. If you build more in-person workshops, it will normalize the feeling of being back to work, which is exhausting for a lot of people. And so realizing that we want to do that in a slow pace helps us overcome fears, feel more connected, and get back on track. Promote and communicate with your teams who's innovating on different ways to collaborate and expose those new processes, new tools that create other balances in this space. And promote ways to overcome health barriers without isolating, as I mentioned. Management themselves have to really look at themselves retrospectively and say, how do managers create continuous improvement for our teams? Look at areas of success where management is leading and supporting teams in a great way, and look at areas that need to be improved and be vocal about how you can improve some of those things. Knowing that it's not just all in one group, but it's really the load is shared and the responsibility of taking this new information, this knowledge of how we work and where we work and how we feel about this change and bringing it to the surface. As leaders, it's really important to share your personal story. Take little anecdotes from your life and share them openly in certain settings, meetings, opportunities to connect on a human level that will bring people back to why we're all here and why we love our jobs or why we're passionate about building these products and services. Demonstrate your own perseverance and courage through the stories. That will instill a sense of courage and perseverance for your task force. Relate everything back to your environment and how we can build in these emotional EQ features to build a better organization, and send a message that really markets who you are authentically, that you use over and over again so people really understand you. For yourself, leading your career strategy, this is really about, taking the experience that you've had in the last 2 years and saying, how has this served me, this new information? Where do I go in my career now? Be honest with yourself. What are the reasons that you might choose a career change? Pandemic, health, location, other factors that you've lived through that have caused pressure, relationships. that make you want to pivot. Hire somebody that can help you plan that career quickly and implement intentional steps to grow yourself and your leadership style and your ability and your skills. One thing that's really important about those performance reviews that you do at your company, use it as a tool to reflect if you're in the right job. If the company is putting importance and emphasis on your career pathway and using that tool to really identify the ways that you can improve, and your leadership is using that tool to support you or get you more training, then they're investing in you. But if you feel as though this tool is not serving you, or you're not getting the right exposures to barriers that you want to solve, or that you're not getting the right recognition, then maybe it's time to move on. Use that practice as a way to do a barometer on your career in your current company. Have a look at your current role and ask yourself, am I in the right space still, or do I deserve more? Do I deserve something different and better for where I am now with all this change that we're going through? Take the time that's been given to you and give it back to your career and supporting your teams, whether it's in your current role or your future role. Thank you for having me. And if you have any questions, let's get into it now.